just in the Discord chat today, I want to start with just Q&A about anything, and then jump into a little bit of deep thinking about the GBTE. But before we jump into that, also just want to just think at a high level, a couple of updates. So first of all, as you're aware, we don't quite have the GBTE on mainnet yet. And I wish we did. It'd be really nice if we had that already. But there is an issue with the Cardano serialization library and using reference scripts. And this is kind of a well-known issue that the Emergo team is working on. And a lot of people are waiting on this solution right now. So it puts us in this position of saying, well, like I really want to honor Nelson, who's already earned a course completion token, and everybody else who's really close. I really want to put something out into the world that shows the work that we've been here doing together on the one hand. And I'm still not sure it's worth it to rush for those reasons at the expense of like putting out a Plutus V1 solution only to roll it back and re-release the whole thing when these tools are ready. So I feel some personal uncertainty and discomfort about that, but I'm still leaning in the direction of, hey, let's wait for this better solution to be online. And I was just talking to Abdel Karim and Jingles, the Mesh team, about this topic and about what the benefits would be of, hey, on the same day, what if they release the updated version of Mesh and we can drop GBTE on mainnet the same day? That would be a really fun day, and it'd be really fun to hype that up. So leaning that direction, even though it does represent on a surface level a bit of a delay. I just wanted to kind of run that by everybody. And Sarah, exactly. So pre-prod, the respin started yesterday, and it was supposed to take about 48 hours. So hopefully by tomorrow, we'll have some real guidance about whether we need to get new protocol parameters or we can use the old ones and how to start using that. And in the meantime, once again, all the metadata we collected from that metadata assignment in the course, all of the records of pre-prod PPBL summer 2022 tokens, I'm pretty sure we're back to the drawing board on all that stuff again. So it puts us in this kind of moment of pause, but also opportunity to like slow down and focus. So I wanted to just share those things first. Anybody have any questions about that or thoughts that you would like to share in one direction or another?
I missed it, unfortunately. Sorry, James. I was
all good. Sorry about that. TLDR, there's an issue with the Cardano serialization library regarding Plutus V2 reference scripts, which means that a lot of the dev community, well beyond Gimbal Labs and Mesh, are waiting on those fixes to the CSL. And so my instinct is still to hold off on putting GBTE on mainnet until we have that and can just put a reference script Plutus V2 version of GBTE out there. But it also makes me uncomfortable because on the surface level, it does represent a delay. And Nelson, that's why I'm a fan of you. Thank you for that answer. And heck yeah, if you're using the time for JavaScript, that's incredible. And on a personal note, I've I've been really grateful for a little bit of this time to slow down this week and kind of think high level, because we have been all moving very fast. But anybody else got thoughts, questions about that?
Do we plan to make that a bounty, or is that an internal Gimbal Labs effort
Well, what's the bounty?
to create the Plutus V2 and make the transition into that?
Oh, it's done. Yeah. So there's a GBTE Plutus V2 version that's up on the public GitLab repo. I'll share the link in just a moment. And there's also a branch on the GBTE front end where we are implementing the new mesh use of reference scripts. The remaining problem right now is that those transactions that are using reference scripts will not validate. They're getting protocol parameter errors, and that traces back to a known issue with the Cardano serialization library. So it's a bit of a waiting game, and I don't like the feeling of powerlessness I feel when I'm like waiting technically for something else. I'm like, wait, couldn't I do something about this? But after talking about it with the mesh guys just right before this meeting, Cremo said that, yeah, we could go into the Rust code and make some changes and maybe get something a little bit sooner. But again, this is a known issue. People are working on it, people who have been working on the serialization library. So yeah, no, there's really no action items, and it's kind of a waiting game right now.
And just to be certain, this is the hash issue where it's estimating the fees and combining the CBOR and then creating the hash, and this Cardano serialization library is handling it differently than how CLI does it. So you come up with a different result. Is that the issue that's happening?
It's hashing the reference script. Yeah. And so you're getting this PP view hashes don't match error from the CSL. Dorian, what does CML stand for? Just remind me.
Oh, I was going to say the multi-platform library from DC Spark.
That's a good question. I don't know right now. We should check on that. Let me look that up after this call.
Dorian, nice to see you. This is Dorian. I met Dorian at Rare Bloom.
Hey, awesome.
Hey guys, yeah. So sorry I missed the other two Zoom meets, but it's been tough because I actually got to go make my commute to work like in 15 minutes. So I've been wanting to join you guys for a while now.
Cool. Hey man, we've got you, and there's never. I hope that we're building a community here where it never feels too late. I hope we can always bring people up to speed. So whatever time you got right now, it's really good to have you here. And please ask questions over the next few weeks. What are you working on right now?
So right now we're just running a stake pool. I came from the second cohort Pioneer program, and I've been kind of just been going to all the workshops. I came from the Austin workshop, and I did the Capstone Pioneer Challenge from the 21st Summit.
Awesome.
So I'm kind of just reiterating and coming back, and just starting at the basics and just keep on going.
Awesome. It's good to have you here. Yeah, and just as you're getting yourself up to speed, just know you can trust that this crew is going to be here every Wednesday and Thursday. So drop by when you can.
No, thank you. Yeah, no, nice to meet you all. You.
Sarah, to your question about unlocking test gimbals, this is going to be a problem right now because the pre-prod network is being respun. So here's another instance of, I think we just have to have a little waiting game right now. I'm pretty sure that all of the student submissions for the faucet project are no longer going to be valid. So that's a big bummer. That was a pretty cool artifact of what people had done, but I think it's just going to be wiped out, and we will confirm that tomorrow when pre-prod is back up. So, you know, I'm expecting the bad news there that all of our work on pre-prod is just going to be wiped, but maybe we'll get good news when we turn on that network again, if it comes online tomorrow or sometime soon. But in the meantime, yeah, those assignments are just not going to be possible. And part of me is like, okay, well, let's just go back and change all those assignments to preview, but that really wouldn't be a good use of time. I don't want to go through and adjust all of that content, knowing that the same thing is likely to happen to preview at some point. Like, this is just going to be the nature of the beast, is that when you're using test nets, they're going to be breaking at some point. The respin, I'm not sure. I don't think those two things are related, because this serialization library issue is an issue on mainnet, just like it is on the Babbage era test nets. So both pre-prod and preview are both on Babbage era. Mainnet is on Babbage era. That serialization issue is true on all of them. And yeah, I have no idea. Has anybody heard why the respin is happening in the first place? All I heard from IOG is that it is happening, but I have not seen a reason why anywhere.
I read something about the reason it has to do with repairing some responses, I guess. Let me look for that and see.
It says that the evolution limit was previously set to 120 key ES periods of 1 day, when in fact it should be set to 62 key ES periods of 1.5 days, the same as it is on the Cardano mainnet. The purpose of this respin is to correct and remove the issue completely.
Ooh, that's actually a really satisfying answer. Thanks, Roberto.
You're welcome.
All right, that's reasonable. Okay, so that's happening. A little bit of a waiting moment right now, but it also gives us time to now look. You know, what I wanted to bring to the table today was a little bit of deep thinking about what else might we want to enable in the GBTE contracts while we do have this moment. Yeah, Nelson.
Hi guys. Yesterday Kyle's talk was really amazing. Like I haven't been excited for that much since a long time. So one thing I asked when we went through the course was why are we doing this with JavaScript? Why are we doing this with React? So yesterday I got to see that people are developing these SDKs around other programming languages. So it was great to see. I wanted to know if people are working on web applications using other web development frameworks that is not JavaScript.
Yeah. So I guess there's a three-part answer to that question, right? Like, why JavaScript for this course? Because it's probably the most accessible to people who are starting off. But yes, there are these other projects happening. And so Cardano Sharp on the .NET framework is such a great example of that. And of course, we should all recognize that you can have a backend microservice running on .NET or even on Java, and all of that can still be perfectly compatible with a JavaScript based front end. So we have that ability. There are other projects in other front end frameworks. Like I know, for example, that some good work has happened with Python libraries. I have not done a survey of that corner of Cardano development in probably like 6 or 8 months. But we could dive into that together. Nelson, if you were going to prioritize another option for front end development, what would you be most interested in?
Oh, I have used Python before, like the Django for development framework before. So
Yeah,
but
I
yeah,
think. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
no, I mean that it's fine. Like I'm starting to learn JavaScript now. It's going great still. Yeah.
Thank you so much for putting time into that. And that obviously that's a really productive approach. The thing I would add is I would love for a Plutus PBL course to offer a module for Python developers someday, right? So if you wanted to look at that together and maybe think about, hey, like what libraries are out there, what can we show people? I think that could be a really useful thread. On these notes of continued development, I hope people noticed, yeah, exactly, sir, React Native, right? Like porting what we already understand about building with a Next.js project and React, taking that knowledge and applying it to building on React Native is really compelling. It's even more compelling now because the barrier of one of the biggest barriers to using React Native, say a year ago, is that even as browser wallets started to be released, there wasn't really a good option for an iOS or Android wallet that would allow us to kind of hook up a React Native app on more of a mobile framework. That has changed. You can download Eternal as an app now on a phone and hook up to it. I haven't tried that with React Native, so I would have a bit of a learning curve, but I'd be interested in exploring that with folks. But even more interesting than that is this app wallet feature of Mesh. I don't know if people have seen this yet in the documentation. Let me just grab this link so you can look at it directly. But App Wallet is essentially going to allow us to manage keys directly in the application or from some backend server. So this is going to make it one step more accessible to building like a React Native app. Yeah, Nelson.
Yeah, and I have another question for this mesh thing. Like when I did the burning token thing, we had this issue of not able to do a portion of tokens, burn that portion of tokens. I think when we make the transaction, we're basically just taking the UTXO that contains those tokens when building the transaction. And I didn't find any way to add another UTXO to the transaction so that there are more funds for the remaining tokens to be allocated to. So that is a problem from the mesh side, right? Like I was thinking, like I was trying to figure out if I could solve it in any way, but I came to the conclusion that it's a functionality that is missing from mesh. Is that true, or am I missing something?
I think I would need to look at that example together to see that. You mentioned that, and I didn't get a chance to just really dig deep into your code to see where that problem was happening. Any interest in taking a peek at that right now?
I'm fine. If it's fine with everybody.
Yeah, let's take a quick look at that, because I think this generalizes to UTXO management, right? And a front end DApp, which is absolutely essential for us to be learning more about.
So like, do you want me to share the screen or
Yeah, if you don't mind, go for it. But also, this is something that we don't have to do this right now, but if you'd be willing, I think it'd be wonderful to look at.
okay, I think we won't be able to do it right now because of the report.
Oh, of course we won't. You're right. Okay, so yeah, let's table that for next week. Let's come back to that. Of course, you're right. Okay. The other thing related to some of these concepts, I hope you saw this in Discord, but just in case you didn't, this, I'm not sure how to say the word, Demeter project is unbelievable. So if you haven't taken a look yet, I just put that in the chat, but we are going to have to rewrite the Plutus PBL course because look at that. When we started the course, it was necessary to, as part of the onboarding materials, force people to beat their heads against the wall and set up their own Nix environment, no matter what. And that is no longer the case. For anybody who can't run those tools locally or just doesn't want to take the time to do it, we now have this tool. It's really incredible, right? And people who show up for Cardano development 6 months, 2 years from now, they're not going to know what it was like because they're going to have tools like this. And on a similar note, this is another thing that's coming for Mesh is if you're familiar with the npx command, which kind of allows you to initialize an npm project from a template. Mesh is working on just an npx project that's basically going to make the PPBL front-end template irrelevant. So some of us were talking on Tuesday afternoon about, hey, when are we going to create some next version of a PPBL course? But you can see the writing is already on the wall. When it comes to onboarding, it's getting easier right before our eyes. And there's going to have to be a version of this course that starts people not from, hey, set up your Nix environment and download this Git repo. It's going to start from, hey, go play with Demeter, go play with npx initialize mesh project, and start from there. It's wild to think about how much more accessible these tools are getting, and we're going to have to adjust the course accordingly. And then we're going to be able to have a faster pathway to getting towards the real juicy stuff. Pretty exciting, right? But everybody who is here now is always going to have that story to tell, right? And we can be those people. I remember when. So that's pretty much what I had in terms of updates. I wanted to frame now something I've been thinking about before sharing a screen, just to kind of get people thinking about this, and then we can look at it together. The current version of GBTE is meant to be simple. There's not too much to it, but it works, right? And so very early in the course, I introduced this idea of, hey, we're going to be building primitives, and that's what's happening. So hold on one second. Okay. But there's clearly ways that we can improve it starting immediately. And one of those ways is thinking about how do we allow people to only commit to bounties that they should be able to commit to. In the front end for GBTE, there's already a basic ability to create a hash from the content of a markdown file. And so basically what we're able to do is think about whether there's a way to represent these bounty hashes that are not created by the blockchain tooling, but just by a JavaScript library. Is there a way to use those hashes in Datum in a way that kind of confirms that people, when they are committing to a bounty, are committing to one that currently exists? And the reason to consider this is transactions. It'll take less transactions in the long run to just post at some regular interval a list of available bounties in Datum than it would be, for example, to mint a token to represent each possible bounty. And so that's the reason, first of all, to consider this. And so before looking at the how, just as I give that initial introduction, does anybody have clarifying questions about what I've said so far? Okay. Okay. With that in mind, here's another concept that kind of goes hand in hand with this one. It's possible to now use an app wallet to sign a transaction. And here's what I mean by this. We can write contracts and we can build front ends that allow people to interact with them the way we want them to. But at the same time, anybody who knows how to could still try to build a transaction that we don't really want to allow via, for example, Cardano CLI. So imagine as a design pattern, having an app wallet built into a project that must sign a transaction in order for that transaction to be valid. Therefore, ensuring that the only way to interact with the contract is through the front end. I know this doesn't sound like it's immediately connected to the Datum idea, but to me, these two things go hand in hand. So I just wanted you to have that concept in your mind as well. Does that raise any clarifying questions for anybody?
Yeah, I got one if that's cool.
Yeah, please.
So yeah, I heard you mention the datum reference. So using datum to verify that it's the smart contract that we want the customer to be interacting with and not like someone else's, correct? And you're saying there might need to be another type of like logical check besides that on the front end side, or are we trying to
Yeah.
come up with better ways of protecting the customer, so to speak?
We're trying to protect our contracts from some misuse by somebody who knows what they're doing. Okay, so on the contract end, what we can do,
Gotcha.
right? It's trivial to add a required signer inside of the Plutus code. All right, so we can just say, okay, this validator will only validate if the transaction is signed by this pub key hash. Then we take the mesh app wallet. I just dropped that link in there, right? And we, in a secure way, right? I think one of the things I was talking to the guys about this too, the app wallet documentation is slightly lacking because I think it needs to have more of a warning, not to just put your signing keys up in a public repo, for example. But used appropriately, app wallet allows us to just build a wallet whose sole purpose would be to sign transactions like this, right? So you build the contract that says require this pub key hash to sign. You use an app wallet to be that signer, and then every transaction that passes through is going to have that signature on it.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so with that in mind, let's take a look at a couple of things here. And it's kind of nice that we're not even able to look at this on mainnet, or sorry, on pre-prod, right? So we can't even be distracted. I just have to open up this. All right. So first of all, okay, I want to take a quick look at the front end for just a sec. Oh, that's why, because I imported it down below. Okay, so first things first, we've got this Blake 2B JavaScript library. And you can look this one up on NPM. And I imported it there. If we look at my package JSON, you can see that I'm pulling in Blake 2B right here as an NPM package. Okay. Oh, and that didn't stay open. And then we use it. We say, okay, just create this buffer that includes the amount of Lovelace, the amount of gimbals, and the content of the bounty. And then we use that information to then create a bounty hash that appears as part of the data about the bounty. And this shows up on the front end, okay? It's a 32 character hash. And you could change this variable right here to make it some other number of characters. But 32 I thought was nice. It's a nice clean number and also will fit in metadata or elsewhere. So first of all, any questions about where the hash is coming from? Okay. So my question is, with this hash, now is there a way we can use this? Just close. Okay. So let me go now into the Haskell part of the project. And there's been a few improvements on to the project on the Plutus V2 side. Some people have noticed some of that. Oops, source. So to date, this withdrawal datum, this datum that is the datum specified for use with the Treasury, it hasn't done much yet. We can go to the types file to look at what withdrawal datum looks like. And you can see it right here. It's just the key of some Treasury issuer. And then there's an integer placeholder to keep track of how many bounties there have been. But this really hasn't been used in any of the business logic yet. In other words, the Treasury is just, or sorry, the Treasury datum is just sitting here as a placeholder. And we could do whatever else we want with it. So what I've been wondering about is, what if this datum right here had a list of hashes that represented a current snapshot of available bounties? Now, let me pause there again. Anybody have initial thoughts or clarifying questions about that?
Okay. Is this a way of record keeping or having like automated rewards sent out to people who have solved bounties? Is that?
This is a way of people only being able to commit to bounties that are actually approved by some owner of a treasury.
Okay. See, nobody can go after, I guess I'm still new to this. So nobody can work on a bounty, or I guess, like, I guess, do any kind of work until it gets committed, or?
Good. Okay. So there's a couple of strongly held opinions that I think do distinguish this bounty system from others. And people might not agree with my opinions that I'm expressing in this code. And I really want to empower people to have their own opinions and change some of these parameters. But I have a big problem with bounties. The way they are often used is that when people post a bounty, first of all, you might not know how many people are working on it. And when you are working on it, you don't have any guarantee that you're actually going to be the first or the best to deliver it. And I want to think about how to counter that. I would like to create a system where it's not about racing other people to complete a bounty, but it's about saying, hey, I want to work on that. I want to focus on that for whatever amount of time it takes. And I know that if I accomplish this thing, I'm guaranteed to get the reward. So the way the process works is people first have to make a commitment that says, hey, I'm going to do this thing. And then when those requirements are met, the bounty is released to them. And there's actually 2 contracts here. We can look at the front end. So this image here kind of shows how it works, right? There's 2 contracts, the treasury and an escrow. There's a whole pool of tokens locked in the treasury. A contributor comes along and says, okay, I want to work on this bounty. And that takes some tokens from the treasury along with a contribution token, all of which gets locked together in a UTXO that represents that commitment to work. Personally, I feel really strongly about this. I want somebody's commitment to mean something, and on both ends, right? I want them to be exercising that, you know, I've only got this one contributor token. And when I commit to something, that token is locked up until I deliver on my commitment. And at the same time, I also feel some level of confidence that I'm going to receive that bounty when I do the work.
Okay, I get it. I guess devil's advocate, what happens if like a company, you know, who's, I guess that's their purpose, they just go and front run like all the bounties, I guess, and they get locked in with commitments.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so that's why we have these contributor tokens. And so 2 things here, actually. First of all, we also want to force people to rethink how a Web3 headless dApp can work. The goal here is not for there to be one instance of this dApp that all traffic flows through. The goal here is for anybody to be able to create their own instance of this system with their own rules about who the issuer is and their own rules for how you get a contribution token. So in the initial instance, only people who complete a certain minimum of the assignments in the Plutus PBL course are going to get this contributor token, right? So this concern about a company being able to front run all of these, at least with this initial instance, it's not going to be a problem because we're just gating access to who holds those contribution tokens. But there might be some future instance where somebody wants to have looser rules about how to become a contributor, and we'd have to think about that concern in order to implement that.
Right. Okay. So this one for V1, let's say, this one is going to be strictly with a certification process
Right.
by going through the GBT. Okay. Okay.
Right. Anybody else have clarifying questions at the system level here? And I'm looking at the chat here. Okay, yeah, Sura. So Sura asks, what if a bad actor gets access to this mesh app wallet? Exactly, right? So if we're going to use the app wallet, we must have a secure way to protect the keys to that wallet. You would never, it's the same question as what happens if a bad actor gets the staking keys for a stake pool, right? The private keys for running or collecting rewards on a stake pool. We got to protect those. And Trevor says too, right? So one downside of this approach, we must have more security. And so looking ahead to Dandelion PBL, for example, which is going to help all of us think about containers and microservices and secrets and that kind of thing. Yeah, this app wallet idea will not work if people don't, first of all, understand the necessity of keeping secrets. So we know that for sure. And then this question about how big can the datum get? Exactly. I'm not sure. That's kind of why I want to play with it and why I want to think about how to format that data.
I guess it's the same size as metadata files.
So that will be our limit.
Yes.
Is that's true for inline datum though, right? Not hashed datum. Is that correct? Like hash datum's always going to be the
Yeah,
same size.
If you have a hash datum, you need the datum in peer format for unlocking the transaction. Therefore, it's the same.
Right.
Okay, I see.
Right. For unlocking, you still need to pass, which is kind of interesting. I mean, and so here's one design question. Maybe inline datum is a good tool for this because it exposes on chain, hey, here's the list of valid bounty hashes. I could see that being a good idea. On the other hand, maybe that list only needs to live in the front end, right? If you take the list of all the current bounties that are on the front end, that should yield the datum hash that's attached to the treasury. Does anybody have initial thoughts on which of those approaches would be better? Inline datum, on-chain versus just hashing some list that's publicly accessible in a repo anyway?
So one thing we're doing at Snaprelia is taking any of the static information and placing that in inline datum and using it as reference input, and then anything that's dynamic and changing, in our case, like project information or donations. This maybe is like the description of the bounty itself, since that can change after collaborating between the contributor and the issuer of the bounty. Maybe that can be placed as datum hash, but then the static information, the name of the bounty and certain information that's not going to change or shouldn't change, be placed into an inline datum and used as reference.
Does that make a difference? Because I can add a new inline datum if I already have a inland datum.
Right. It's a question of, should we think about it as adding additional datum or replacing a datum on a Treasury UTXO?
And these are amendments, right? Is that the scope of this? Is these changes are amendments to the bounties?
It could either be a change to an existing bounty, or it can be adding a new bounty, right? So in the front end, there's this list of markdown files. The hash is generated by looking at the number of tokens in these two fields, and then everything else. This is our like YAML metadata for this markdown file. This is the HTML. This creates the HTML content. So you're basically hashing this and these together. So one question would be, how many 32 character hashes could we fit in the data? Can anybody do that back of the napkin math for me?
Snaprelia, Kaon did that. It was around 300. and he used a safety net of 250, and we're actually like folding folding a lot of the data hashes into one. So yeah, I think he calculated around 300. It's 30, about 39, 38 to 39 it's per hashed data for input. He's using 250 as like a safety net personally.
So that's pretty reasonable, especially considering that we're talking about having unique instances of this thing. I like that. Okay. Just going back to this.
So
Okay,
if we-
sure. Oh, go ahead, go.
So if we do go over 300, we could. So I you have it broken down, right, James, between Gimbal Labs bounties, mesh bounties. So there's different categories. If each category was its own contract, do you think that would basically say, okay, now we can do 300 per contract?
We could do 300 per instance. Yeah, so
I think yeah.
you're introducing the word category. Absolutely. If the goal is to have categories of GBTEs, each one would be a unique instance with its own treasury. And so therefore, that would be straightforward enough. That's great. Yeah.
To which UTXO would the hashes be added?
My instinct is the treasury UTXO.
Isn't this it enough to add it to each bounty UTXO and just one hash for the bounty?
This is where I wish we had pre-prod running so we could look at this together. But what's already happening, right? Let's look at it this way. Okay, currently that hash is not in any of the Plutus data. Right now, the bounty details are made up of pub key hashes for the two parties, the token amounts, and our expiration time. But that hash could be included in these bounty details. They absolutely. Where the hash is used is when we build the transaction to commit to a bounty. There's going to be a data type here called bounty TX metadata. And that bounty TX metadata has the hash that comes from the project in it. So this goes on chain in metadata, where it can be referenced, because so far we're not using it to do any validation logic. This is for kind of the human validation part of saying, okay, I can see that hash there matches this hash from that was created by this markdown file. I can see that they generate the same hash, so I can verify on my own that that's a true bounty. So far, so good there. There may be a reason to connect. There may be a reason to include this hash in the bounty datum, right? We could just add that. This is the TypeScript type, and this is the Haskell type, but they're aligned with each other. There may be a reason to add that there, and we can consider that. But what I'm thinking is not as much from the perspective of unlocking a bounty. When you unlock a bounty, you're saying, okay, that thing is complete. I want to be able to create the bounty, to lock up the bounty by validating that the treasury is allowed to do that. Just going back to the chat here. So Trevor, yeah, if this might introduce a limit to an instance, although if it does turn out to be 300 hashes, that feels pretty good. I would love to get to the point where we break the thing by having more than that, but that sounds like a pretty good limit to start with because of how I'm thinking about the scope of this thing, right? Remember, the goal here is not to build a monolith, but to build something that anybody can take and use on their own terms. And because of that, the needs for handling thousands of activities, it disappears. We're not trying to build that system. We're trying to really set an example for what a distributed collection of headless dApps could look like. So regarding project management, yeah, there's going to be, so initialized here in the front end project, there's a page that has a dashboard on it. And this has a couple of components on it. If I open up task status list right here, basically what you can see in the JavaScript project is there's already 3 ways to view the raw data. The raw data of these commitments. And some of the initial bounties are going to challenge people to present this data in a more helpful way. Okay, so I wanted to really put this out there as a way for people to express their own creativity and to think about it. And I would show this to you right now, but there's no data to show because pre-prod is down. Sorry about that. But yeah, let's come back to this next week when pre-prod is up again. I'm really excited. And what I've tried to do is build as much scaffolding as possible here. So types are taken care of. If I look at contributor list, for example, there's some specific types, contributor history and escrow. Whoops, where was I just there? Oh, that just closed. Contributor list. Yeah, escrow TX is a data type, as you can see. So a lot of typing is already done. And hopefully the fun part is ahead for people to say, okay, well, given that all this data is already here, and there's a bunch of hooks here that are oh, that's not it though, sorry. There's some types made and we can pull the data in. The question is now, how do we take this raw data and turn it into something that helps people with their decision making? Because I agree, we're going to need some kind of dashboard. And yeah, thanks, Trevor. Good. And this is helpful to me too, to kind of talk through it and try to make sure it's making sense to folks. So coming back to the question, if we replace withdrawal datum with a list, what do we need to pay attention to? Could it work just to say, to redefine this withdrawal datum type instead of how it is right here as just an integer and a pub key hash? Could it work just to make this an array of strings, right? Could that be the datum? And then could we check against that? Do you see any barriers to creating that or considerations that we'll want to think about? I'm gonna make a branch of this to just do a little live coding now that we got to this point. Let's do. We'll call this list bounty datum. Okay, and so just got some room to play around in a clean branch here. And let's think about this. So I'll minimize my distractions here. So the first thing I'm thinking is, well, I'm also thinking about leaving pub key hashes behind with not to distract from the point, but I'm starting to also wonder if the treasury issuer, if it would be better to represent that with a token rather than a pub key hash. So we can come back to that question, but I'm going to just comment this bit out for now and leave a note to self. Actually, I'm just going to delete it. Consider representing issuer with a token instead of PKH. And so this is important because of, think in the context of what we were talking about with Kyle yesterday regarding multisig. One way to handle multisig is to create a multisig address and to collect signatures. And there's always going to be use cases for that. That's really, really important. But it's not the only way to consider it. For example, let's say you wanted to create a one of many signing policy. There's 5 potential signers. One of them has to sign. Why not just give those 5 signers a token, right? And if that token is present, then that transaction was signed by one of those 5 people. This is absolutely a decision that there's no single right answer to. We just have to be aware of both of those options at all times. And so I've been thinking about, a quicker way to distribute ownership of this treasury might be just to mint issuer tokens. Yeah, I agree, Trevor. Yeah. It's tough to test anything, but luckily we can at least test to see if our Cabal REPL will open after I make a couple of changes here. So I'm gonna just leave issuer out of this for now. I'm also gonna leave the bounty count out, which is gonna give me a different error. So I might have to throw something in there as a placeholder. But what if I just had bounty hash list was a list of byte string? And with Adrian, would this be built-in byte string right here? I don't have my notes open.
Yes, it's built in byte string.
Built and with a lowercase I like that, right?
Should be correct, yes.
That should work. All right. And Curtis, I just saw your hand. What's up?
No, I was going to throw in that something with using an NFT instead of the PKHs. That is an asset that could be lost, right? Or sent to the wrong person or whatever. It does have opportunity for issues potentially.
That's exactly right. You're exactly right. Right. And so this is something I think humanity is going to learn a lot about in the next 10 years, right? Anytime you mint a token, somebody might send it to somebody else. But is that the same thing on Web 2 as saying, anytime I have a username and password, somebody might steal it? or I could send my credentials to somebody else. I mean, I share my Netflix credentials with I don't know how many people.
You're brave, but I agree. It's identical. However, blockchain allows us, at least how I feel, blockchain allows us to go beyond just having a credential that can be stolen or shared or right. And so to start thinking along that path of how can we go a step beyond Web 2 and the authentication mechanisms that they put in place, because that is where I feel like blockchain shines, is it gives us so much more control.
Yeah. And at least if I shared my Netflix token with somebody, I would have two options. I could share my entire seed phrase so they could have my whole wallet, or I could send them the token, but I wouldn't have it anymore. All right, so at least it's an improvement in that regard. We're always going to face the problem of people just sharing their entire wallet with somebody else. But then this, I'm really curious, and I've spoken before about like forcing issues. I think this is a case where we kind of have to, you know, and we're doing it with the initial GBTE, the contributor token, which is just going to have a currency symbol on it, right? That token, once minted, people are going to be able to send it around, send it to somebody else. But what if they do? Two things could happen. One, somebody who didn't earn a token, but somehow bought one or talked somebody into sharing with them. What can they do with that token? Well, they can commit to a bounty. And once they do, they could either complete the bounty, so the work gets done by the wrong person, or they never do, and we wait until the expiration date, the issuer reclaims that bounty, and that contributor token is now out of circulation. To me, that's pretty incredible, right? Yeah, sure, go sell your contributor token to somebody. What are they going to do with it? They're either going to prove they can contribute or they're not. And if they can't, their token is reclaimed and we can just burn it. So thinking about treasury issuer tokens, if first of all, they would only go to people who have established some level of trust in a business partnership. And if somebody breaks that trust by giving their issuer token to somebody who shouldn't have it, or by, you know, they could drain a treasury. They could say, well, oh, now I procured this treasury issuer token and I procured a contributor token. I'm going to create a bounty to get all of the funds in that treasury, and then I'm going to use my issuer token to distribute that bounty and give all the funds to myself. Okay. Well, sure. The cost of that was whatever was in that bounty treasury at that time. But is that worth the loss of the relationship that led to sharing issuer tokens in the first place? We get to find out together, right? I would love to assume the best until somebody who, you know, we consider having a trusting relationship with each other decides to break that trust. I think that's a really interesting opportunity. So, but again, right, these are all things that we have to be thinking about. So this is what the logic would look like. And just because of just maybe some people already understand this, look at this error I have right here, right? It says I could use new type because essentially there's only one field in this data type that I'm trying to build. But what I'm going to do to remove this warning is I'm just going to add like a dummy field here. because I'm probably going to add something back in later. But you know what? Let's just imagine this issuer token name. I'll make that a token name, because that's something I've been meaning to play with anyway. So if, and you know what I'm also going to do? I'm going to change the name of this. It's currently withdrawal datum. I'm going to just change this to treasury datum. Feels a little bit easier to understand. And then I'm going to have to pass that treasury type down here. Treasury datum. And that just changed it, yeah, up here in the export. Okay. So my goal is to see if I can just at least, let me at least try to on this machine, I'm about to embarrass myself here. I've been really lazy. I just haven't even added extra experimental features to my config, because I don't mind doing that step. All right, so this is going to open up. What I want to do is at least see if we can get a REPL to open with this new type. Just to make sure that built-in byte string piece looks good. I'm going to change withdrawal datum, treasury datum. And let's just see if that's okay so far. Oh, I didn't save this file. Whoops. Save that so it knows it's treasury datum now. Try that one more time. Okay, so that type is fine, right? And just for anybody who's still kind of thinking about their development patterns for Haskell, I couldn't recommend this more, right? All I'm doing, there's no logic here using this yet. I just want to make sure I didn't have any syntax errors. For example, I often forget that this is supposed to be a lowercase I. So what if I had used an uppercase I right there? And I try to load the REPL now. I would see that error. Okay, so this just, it can never hurt to try to run your REPL and make sure that your syntax is looking good. If I change that back to a lowercase I, load it up again. You might also notice that I'm exiting my REPL and loading it again instead of pressing :R. That's just a habit I developed because that in REPL reload, I found a few edge cases early on where it just didn't always work. So I have a habit now of just closing my REPL and reopening it if I'm making big changes. But if there's little things happening, you can just do :R like this anytime. Okay. So we know we have this type accessible now. And in 10 minutes, let's just try to build a little something here. So hopefully it makes sense that the logic we're going to add is going to be part of the commitment step. All right, so I want to add something here. And the error could be, that is, not a valid bounty hash. And how would I pass this datum? So it seems to me, and I'm just thinking out loud, jump in here with me, but this is, I've kind of been saving this task to do it live. So please interrupt or ask questions. I'm just thinking about this in real time. in order to compare the hashes that are in this list of datum right here to what we're trying to commit to, it does seem that I would have to add a bounty hash to the redeemer. Does that logic check out for you guys? In order to be able to say, oh yeah, that bounty hash is part of the list, I need to look at what's in the datum, but I also need to pass my what I'm trying to accomplish to the redeemer. So it seems to me that if I was gonna do this, I would need to change the bounty details to also include this hash. But if somebody can think of a way to do it without that, that's awesome too. And Sarah, to your question, so GBTE types, let's look at that for just a moment. So the file I'm in right now, types, has this module name, GBTE.types. And the validator here says GBTE.treasury validator. If you look at the source folder here, there's a subfolder in source called GBTE. So that's where the dot is coming from. You basically, just by using folder structures in a Haskell project, you can create like module dot, A dot B or whatever. And when we expose these modules here in our .cabal file, you can see that we have the source directory is source, matching this right here. And then inside of that, there's these 4 modules that have folder name .file. You could just as well change the source folder to be like this. And then you could remove the GBTE dot from all of these, and it would work the same way. But if you did that, you would then remove that from the module name as well, if that makes sense. Okay. I like the clarity. I like using this feature of Haskell to make my file names shorter, but to say, look, these are all files in a module, right? So I have the module name dot the file purpose right here. But there's other ways to think about that. This is just, this one works the best for me. So types is one of the 4 files we are exposing in this, or it's one of the 4 modules we are exposing in this project. And what it does is it just allows us to separate some concerns. You can build a Haskell project without having a separate types file. And in fact, earlier in the course, I think the faucet project, we might not have separated them. Double check if that's the case. If I go into the course repo, the faucet project, yeah, you see how the faucet project doesn't have a types file? Because the type for like faucet params or faucet redeemer, these are all defined right here in the very same file. But they could be extracted. I could cut this out of here, put it in a file called types, and then import types so I could use these now in the validator. And that's exactly what's happening in the GBTE project. So we define a bunch of types we need: treasury param, treasury datum, bounty details, etc. We do it all in one place so that then in the validator, we can import GBTE types. In the escrow validator, the other contract, we could do the same thing. And this also allows for easier sharing of types between modules. And then we could just reference those things. So once again, treasury param, defined here in types, imported here like this, and then used in the validator right here. Treasury datum, treasury action, same thing. So I hope that helps as people are just thinking about project structure. What I need is to extend this bounty details type right here to have a bounty hash. No, not a list. And this is going to be a built-in byte string. So I can reload this, make sure it still loads. Oh, doesn't, because I didn't account for this. I'm actually not going to worry about equality. I probably should, though. Let's do that. Okay. I'm just going to follow the design pattern here. So we're defining how equality works right here. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to cut this short because I have another call starting in a couple minutes. But let's just see if that loads up. Looks like it's going to be okay. All right. So we've successfully extended this type right here. Treasury action also uses that type as it's defined above. But we need to, this is a little bit of an inefficiency right here, but I'm leaving it for now. This can be cleaned up later. But there's a different reason why this is still here. But I'm gonna be a little bit redundant here. Bounty hash. And we'll make that a built-in byte string as well. And reload that. Oh, I need to build that equality too. Let's just do that real quick. And oh yeah, I didn't give that, I didn't define that. So let's just define, actually, I don't even need to define it. Check bounty hash. And then as a placeholder, because I got to cut this short for now, I'm just going to go to the bottom here. I'm going to say check bounty hash is a bool. And maybe I've shown you this before, but I also like, once again, just to make sure my syntax is okay, just set this equal to true, just to make sure that everything looks good. And it does. So now what I've done is I've at least given myself a space to start building out the logic of this bounty hash check. We've expanded the types in treasury action. And now we have a function to flesh out as we check that that hash is valid. I will push these changes just so other people can play with it to this branch where we're testing out this logic if anybody wants to mess around. But thanks for thanks for the live coding session. This is just me thinking out loud about something I've wanted to implement for a while. And yeah, we'll test it as soon as pre-prod is up and running again. In 2 hours, I'm going to be in the garage in the Gimbal Labs Discord with a couple of guys from Disco Solaris, including Dagwell, who's often here at these sessions. Those guys have been thinking about implementing GBTE in that metaverse project they're building, and we have a lot of ties to Disco Solaris. I'm excited about what they're building. I try not to get wrapped up in NFT hype too often, but I do get excited about people who are building stories and opportunities for creators. So I've been kind of dipping toes into that. And one of the people behind that project gave a really nice donation to keep the Dandelion Community Service running. So these are legit people with good ideas. So if you want to hang out with Disco Solaris and think about GBTE and how it might apply to a project like that, open meeting in the garage 2 hours from now for anybody who wants to stop by. Until then, thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
See you soon.